Thank you guys for watching the Animal One Guy YouTube videos. If you like this video, please leave a like and even comment below. And if you like all my content, please hit the subscribe button. And why not click the bell icon for notifications too? That way you can see all my videos. Give me the ball. This is a question I get asked all the time. When do you want to increase or add humidity to your snake's enclosure during the shedding process? And this is important because too much humidity for too long can lead to your snake becoming sick. Just is the same as too little humidity. So humidity is this perfect balance you try to find, and too much or too little in either direction for an extended period of time can lead to damaging the snake. Most often, too little humidity and the snake's lungs dry up and they get little actually wounds on the lungs as they're breathing because they're dry, and it leads to a respiratory infection. Sometimes you can fix that with a little increased of humidity, heat, and Vicks Vapor Rub to kind of soothe the lungs and let them heal. And sometimes you need a vet to intervene. But let's look at Zelda, for instance. So here is a boa constrictor. And if we come and look at her face, she's getting ready to shed. Her eyes are just past the blue phase. And her body, you can tell, just has that whitish look to it. And some little iridescence of blue underneath the skin. So keep in mind, as the snake is getting ready to shed, it releases a liquid from its body, including on top of its eyes, that is meant to moisturize and separate the old upper layer of skin and the new healthy skin underneath. So that's supposed to provide some moisture and just basically push everything apart. That way when the snake starts to shed, it will come off easily. That is not enough on its own. Snake requires, typically, if you want a perfect shed that's not going to damage the snake and just make it easier for the snake, it requires an increase in the humidity level. But now the key is, when do you want to add humidity? So we never know when our snake is going to shed, right? Why do snakes shed? The snakes eat, and eventually they're growing and their skin is stretching and stretching. And unlike human skin, where our skin can grow and shrink, their skin cannot do that. Their skin gets to a stretch limit. That's as much as that skin can be. But the snake still needs to grow. So now the snake needs to grow new skin that is larger and then capable of stretching larger. So that's why they shed. Their skin has just reached the maximum of, we can no longer spread these scales anymore. We need new, larger scales and scales that are able to spread more. But that can be based on so many things. Age of the snake, amount of feeding, how often you feed, and when I say amount of feeding, the amount of food you feed during the feeds, how often the feeding is taking place, how active the snake is, the type of snake as well. Larger snakes typically shed less often, especially larger adult snakes. Okay, is the snake healing from any wounds? And is the snake around breeding season where the snake could produce offspring or eggs? Or have you been breeding the snake? Because typically then you do have that type of natal, prenatal shedding that takes place. Okay, so we're not exactly sure when all those things are going to happen, but you can tell when those things start to happen. The snake's eyes will go blue because the eyes are so clear that they shed the outer layer of their eye skin. It is called the eye cap. And because that skin is so super clear, because the snake has to see through it, you will see it filled with blue. The blue phase can last anywhere from a day to about a week, depending on the snake, the size of the snake, etc. Because it's not just happening with the eyes, that blue phase is taking place along the entire body of the snake. We can just see it at the eyes. Now, that is too early. There's still some time to go during the blue phase. So what I tell people is, you want to increase the humidity right as the blue phase is ending. So you've noticed your snake is blue. You're going to watch her every day, and on one of those days, the blue phase won't be completely gone. As you can see, Zelda, her eyes are still a little cloudy, a little bit of bluey, because also remember that old eye cap is now separated from the new eye cap, so there is a gap, so you'll have some cloudiness there. And the snake's vision is bad from the blue phase, where they're pretty much blind, through the shed. Although they do get some vision back after the blue phase goes away, still because of that gap and the old eye cap, it's like putting a piece of slightly frosted plastic in front of your eyes. Although we can see through it, kind of, our vision isn't as good. So now is the time to increase the humidity, because the shed should be coming anywhere within the next handful of days to a week. And the best way I like to add shed is with just some type of hand sprayer. I just have I have a couple different ones depending on what I'm doing. This is one that has a 2-gallon container with a pump on it that's on a wand. This is much easier to do in some instances. And you want to spray basically everything down. The walls, the substrate. But here's a key if you really want to increase humidity quickly. You're going to want to make sure you heavily soak the area that is directly underneath the heat source. So in this case, radiant heat panel up there. We're going to make sure we heavily soak this ledge plus the substrate underneath, because as the heater is on, it is going to heat up the substrate that's now saturated with water underneath it, which is going to cause it to evaporate up into the air, which is going to drastically increase the humidity. During this time as well, you want to get your snake wet. So if you do use room temperature or warm water to do this, it's just much more pleasant for the snake. The snake is never going to find it super pleasant, so don't worry that much. This isn't bad. It's not harming the snake, but getting the snake wet like that is just going to be another thing to increase the shedding capability of your snake. So you're just going to go ahead and heavily soak this enclosure. Okay, I've soaked this enclosure. I've soaked the snake. She's fine. Everything's fine. There's water. I'm going to go ahead and close the enclosure because we want to trap that humidity inside. But let's remember, and don't panic, especially if you have a humidistat, we have now increased the humidity level to a level that is humid enough to make your snake sick with this level of humidity if he or she were to be exposed to it for a long period of time. So because we're just doing this for the shed, we know we're about a week out. And when we're talking about getting our snake sick because of too much humidity, we're talking about, a month or two of that constant humidity at that level. So this humidity is going to decrease on its own naturally because we have slight vents in the tank and the water will eventually go away on its own. There's Zelda, she's soaked. You also don't be scared when you wake up and you see the glass is fogged or is wet, because again, that's that evaporation that's taking place. That's fine. So if you really increase that humidity level super huge and then your snake shed and you were worried about it being too humid, then very simple for that period after the snake has shed, but you think everything is still too soaked and it would take a long time to go away, you'll just crack the doors. In this type of tank, this would allow my snake to escape. But this would not allow this size snake to escape and would still keep a good amount of air flowing, especially if I do this on both sides. If it's still too humid, open it up, take your snake out. You can put a fan in there. You can run a dehumidifier in the room. If you had a small dehumidifier, you could stick it in the tank while your snake is outside of the tank. So, but again, that's for a really long extension of time. Hopefully this has helped you guys deal with a snake that is getting ready to shed, will need some high humidity, but doesn't, know when you have to add it. That's the big thing. Sometimes they get them sick. So hopefully this helps, guys. Take care. Thank you so much for all your support. Thank you guys for supporting my reptile rescue family.